Okay, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. As I mentioned before, my name is Kim Gaji Alexander. I'm one of the directors at Bethesda Green. We are an environmentally focused nonprofit based in Bethesda, Maryland. And we're excited today to have one of our sustainability series, which is where we bring topics of interest to the residents of Montgomery County and specifically Bethesda. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a great speaker with us here today. His name is Ryan Zerbe, and I will give you a little bit of background about Ryan. Here we go. All right, so Ryan is the Watershed Outreach Planner for the Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection. He has over 20 years of experience in the Delaware and Chesapeake Bay watersheds, working on a variety of conservation efforts and water quality improvement projects. For the past 12 years, he's created community outreach and watershed stewardship initiatives for the county. This entails developing new and innovative programs, forging community partnerships with the public, nonprofits, watershed groups, and homeowners to encourage them to adopt stormwater prevention practices and promote the health of local streams. Projects he has worked on include the county's watershed restoration and outreach grant programs, which has provided nearly $3 million to local nonprofits, Green Streets programs, Montgomery County Green Fest, the H2O Summit, and Saltwise campaign. And he received his BS in Wildlife and Fishery Science with a Forest Science minor from the Pennsylvania State University and a certificate in environmental education from the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point. So Ryan, I stopped sharing my screen and I'm going to have you share yours, and we're going to go ahead and get started.
Okay, all right, welcome everybody. Let me share my screen, hold on. One second. There we go. All right. Can everybody see?
Yes, you're good.
All right, is that working? Okay, there we go.
Yes, there you go.
All right, sorry about that. Okay, well, welcome everybody. Again, I'm Ryan Zerbe from the Department of Environmental Protection, and I'm going to be talking about stormwater in Montgomery County. So when we start out, has anyone ever seen a picture like this before? This is after a 2-inch storm, and we always see this kind of thing in this area, unfortunately. But this is after rain throughout the week of about 1/4 of an inch, a couple of days, 1/4 an inch, and then once the soils get saturated, then we have a 2-inch storm, and we have all kinds of stormwater coming down off these hard surfaces and raising the levels of our streams. So one thing I wanted to show everyone is our county stream health before we even get started on some of this other areas. So one of the points that we show, this is an area where we show the conditions of our streams. So we have a stream condition rating of excellent, good, fair, poor, and we have a team of biologists that cover this. And they look at the different types of macroinvertebrates, fish in those streams, and then they get a rating. And you can check from your address to find out what the rating is in your stream by going to that website right there. And it gives an explanation. So the one I'm looking at right now is Little Falls, and then we have a explanation of what the stream conditions are. And unfortunately, this one is poor, and this is very near the Bethesda area. So how could we change the environment? You might be able to see this area here. This is a little bit of a, let's see, this is an area, I don't have my pointer, unfortunately, but you see the star point there. That's where Old Georgia and 355 join. And if you look off to the left, you can see a little bit of the beginnings of the Bethesda area, and then some more forested area off to the left more so. So this is a 1951, and this is off of the county map viewer. So when you look now again, here's Bethesda today. from the county map viewer, and you can see the big difference that we've had, especially over on the left side when it comes to development and the expansion in the Bethesda area. Stars in the same spot, old Georgetown and 355. So you can see how much we've expanded in 50, 70 years. So what's the problem with that? Here's an example of one that I use quite often now. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to put it out in your area, but this is the Sligo Creek. I'm sure everyone is very familiar with this area, but the length of the development that's caused or that's been done in these areas has really taken a toll on our streams. So historically, back in the 1920s and even further back, if you can see the yellow here, this is what the area that the streams used to be. That used to be the platform of where they were at, the footprint. And so the yellow there is the historic area, and the blue is the current area. So really, over that time, 26% of the length of the stream has been lost. And that's because of all this development. So it's piped, it's either bulldozed over, underground, things like that. And then what happens is those areas that used to have wetlands or be connected to the floodplains, then the water was able to expand out and not create as much of a flooding situation, and it was able to handle that and absorb it. So now when we pipe it, we don't have the ability to slow it down before it gets to our streams. So runoff. Everybody, I think, in this, I'm not sure the crowd, but everyone knows what runoff is. But water does not soak into the ground. It hits some these harder surfaces like rooftops, driveways, things like that, and parking lots, and it collects contaminants that flow, and then it goes directly into our streams, into our storm drain pipes, and eventually leads to our streams. So there's two major issues with that, which I explained earlier when we were showing the flooding area that home. It's the volume, the timing of the runoff, and really the water quality. So those are the two things that really affect the issues with runoff. And to kind of explain this a little bit further, to compare the difference of a natural environment and the urban environment, this is an example from the Philadelphia Water Department, which I really like. But you see your natural environment, we don't have the buildings, there's no hard surfaces, you have the natural kind of spongy soil, and it's able to have about a 25% infiltration in the first layer of the soil, and then it also has a deeper penetration into the subsoil areas. So when it rains, you have that much being absorbed back into the ground, and then you also have evaporation of about 40%, which leaves 10% of just runoff that comes across the surface runoff that comes off of the land. But when you build on it, we have all these buildings, and then those are all surfaces that are not allowed to or not able to absorb water, and we have very little infiltration in the ground because it's either paved over or there's a building there or things like that. And really, since the soils are so compact, there's very little infiltration into the soil. So what happens when we have that is we have about 55% that ends up running off, which you can see that is a huge increase in volume, and that's what we end up seeing with a lot of the flooding that we get today. I could say equivalent. It's about just that comparison. It's about 5.4 million gallons of additional water entering into our streams. So it's about more than 7 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Big difference. And to kind of illustrate this again, this is just two examples. This is also in the Pennsylvania area, I believe. So again, I wish I had my pointer, sorry. You can see the green. This example is urban Mercer Creek. So when it rains, the very first beginning, it's the hour, the very first time we have a huge spike in the amount of volume for the water. And it's just higher stream flow increases, higher peak flow. This happens when we have flash floods and a lot of increased erosion because you're getting basically it's a wall of water that's hitting our streams in those areas. And then it goes down really quickly too. But if you have an area that's forested, there's much more ability for the water to absorb into the ground. And then you can see the blue line here where there's not as much of a spike of an increase in the volume of the water that's coming through there. And this is under cubic feet per second. So that's a lot of water that's rushing through these creeks at that time. So that's kind of just an example of the amount of water that's coming through some of these areas where they're really built compared to a forested area. And then, of course, with it, it takes all of these contaminants, trash, higher temperatures, water that's coming off of surfaces like the parking lots, the temperature is higher. Oil spills, pet waste, all those things can end up washing down and into our streams. Again, trash. So those are all connected to our storm drain system, and all the storm drains connect to our streams. And so it's basically, if it's left on the ground, it goes through our storm drain system and into our creeks. And again, those end up clogging some of our streams too, and our streets. So that leads, unfortunately, to existing conditions like this. This is a typical stream bank erosion in our area. A lot of the streams that we go out to will see this. It's about 10 to 15 feet deep, where the stream used to be at the top of that level, and that's just erosion that's occurred over time as we built in these areas. Here's another one. Yeah, like same example. Basically, the stream is supposed to be up there. That's 15 feet of erosion over time. So in forested areas, there is a natural ability for erosion. There is a natural process of erosion. It happens. But we certainly accelerate that by the type of building and development that we do in our areas. So there's another example, just the accumulation of trash that we get into our streams, and it doesn't get cleaned up, unfortunately, unless we do cleanups. So let's talk about changes during the development process. Really, so development changes the character of a neighborhood. So this is actually from Bethesda. You may know what this area is. So this is some of the homes that were built early in the time, and you can see here, it's forested. Well, not forested. There's trees there. There's some landscaping. It's pretty regular house. And what's been happening over the last several years is people will buy the lots and then they'll be resold, and we build larger homes. And some of them are actually built up completely, taken in that entire area. And you can see the difference between this home and the one next to it. So the more these houses increase, the more impervious surfaces are, the larger the roof size. This one has a driveway now, things like that. Now, some of these have been done before the Stormwater Act of 2007, but I'll show you a couple examples of how this has gone in this area. So, and then next door neighbor did the same thing. So we have there's nothing wrong with these homes, but you'll see as I get further along what happens in that situation. So to show a little bit of a comparison of financially from this, we had to think about what effect this was having, like on our tree canopy. So trees are very important for the protection of stormwater as well. It absorbs rain, first flow, rainfall, things like that. So they're important to have, and the roots keep the structure, keep the soil in place when we're doing these, when we have these projects. So for the first home, sold for $615,000. And then once the new house was built, it was almost $1 million more. So you can see a big difference in the costs for these. So the area is being built and being, I guess you could say, improved, but it depends on your eye of the beholder, I guess. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. But so there's just a big difference in what might have been a smaller time kind of community feel, and now some of the larger homes. So changes over time. Bethesda had redeveloped lots. This is from 2002 to 2011, and the red areas are all lots that were changed, like the picture I showed earlier, where it was like a smaller home, maybe it was a quarter of an acre, something like that, and they built a much larger home and pretty much took out all of the trees on that lot. Now you go into 2012 to 2016, and this slowed down a little bit, but we still have some large development continuing to go on there, and more trees being taken out and less area for stormwater absorption. Now we go back into 2018. Those are in yellow, still happening. We still have more and more lots that are being, there's less area for stormwater absorption. So what does that look like actually? And so bird's eye view as a close-up. So here's one of the lots that was developed in 2011. It's about a 1 acre, and you can see, again, wish I had my pointer, sorry, but you can see the one on the left. It's a lot more forested, a lot more trees, smaller house, and a little bit of a driveway. But then it was bought and then rebuilt, essentially cleared out. The driveway is put in. I think, I'm not sure what's in the beginning of, or the top close to the road there, but a lot more impervious surfaces, much larger roof, and essentially no trees on the property. Here's another example of some of the areas that we're doing the trees completely taken out. So these three on the left, you can see the little rectangles, and they're the shapes. So this was 2 homes that were in that area, but took up 3 building lots. So you have two homes there, and then with redevelopment, we had 3 much larger homes. Basically cleared out all the trees in that area, and have basically put this little postage stamp there, and have no area for anything to absorb water, and no trees. So what's the big deal about all this stuff? Really, it's damage to a property and our infrastructure. And I'm sure many of the folks that are on this call have seen this. Just to show a little bit of a comparison, so we have 1,500 miles of streams in Montgomery County, but there's 11,000 miles of stormwater pipe, storm drain pipe, and 900 major outfalls. So it's covering about 500 square miles of Montgomery County. And just to kind of give that a little bit of perspective, this 13,000 miles is about the perimeter of the United States. So that's a lot of miles. A lot of pipe. That's a lot of water. And you can see, like on the picture on the left, there is, the stream used to be up that level at the bottom of that outfall. There's a little pipe there, an outfall pipe. And then we also have pipes on the right side. That is a sewage pipe, WSC sewage pipe, where all this erosion, it affects our infrastructure. So it's really important to be thinking about these things as we're doing development. And to show a little bit difference of stormwater and impervious surfaces. So when we have a stream in a watershed that's about 8% impervious, that's what we look at when we are doing our SPA. It's our special protection areas. So about an 8% impervious cover is really the max of what we'll be looking at in those areas. So anything that is above about 10%, that's where when our streams, that the aquatic life basically declines, and it's very difficult to get reestablished. It used to be about 15%, and now more and more studies are coming out, and they're finding less and less where it's able to be recovered. So if you look at an area in the middle, the picture in the middle, that's an example of a stream that's in a watershed where it's about 20% impervious cover is surrounding that area. And then finally, at the last, there's kind of what we have in our area. Unfortunately, in some areas, I don't know specifically what it is in the Bethesda area, but stream with a watershed with 30% impervious cover. So 30% is very high. We've worked in areas that are almost as 50% impervious. That's really a detriment to our streams. And as you can see, this is a result where we have, straight up and down stream banks, clear erosion, and really some bad impacts there. So what does the county do to help these things? We have several different programs that we work on. And we have our capital improvement design projects. That's where we do like stream restorations, stormwater pond retrofits, where we turn a pond from a dry pond, which is basically it's not really a pond, it's just an area where it's grassed and it's depression. But when it rains, that's where all the water flows, and we convert those into wet ponds so that it's wet a certain part of the time, and then it can process the water a little bit better. We also do our RainScapes program, which I'll get into in a little bit. That's a volunteer program for residents where they can put in rain gardens and things like that on their home and take up stormwater from their own home. And there's rebates for that. We have our tree Montgomery program, which you can get a free tree for a native tree for your property on from the county. Organic lawn care. We do stormwater maintenance on 14,000, over 14,000 stormwater facilities now. So there's a lot of those all throughout the county, and that's a big job. And then, of course, our grant program, which you talked about. We do a pet waste program when we work with HOAs to set up pet waste stations and collect pet waste from rather than having it flow down to the stream. And of course, litter, trash, recycling. We also monitor our streams. And then the last one is a regulatory thing where MS4 is a stormwater permit that we get from the federal government and also from the state. And that's where we have to basically be in charge of everything that comes out of our storm drain pipes. So our capital improvement projects, these are the ones where we're talking about the stream restorations, our pond retrofits, and our green streets. Here's an example of the Hollywood branch. And what we're really trying to do here is, this is an example of a step pool area. And we reconnect the stream to the floodplain so that when it does rain, there's an area where the water can go outside of the banks rather than just rushing right down straight through the middle. Here's another one that's in a very tight area. May not be able to connect this to the floodplain as well, but we do protect the sides. If you can see, there's some like larger rocks in the back towards the top, I guess, of this photo, and then we plant trees along the sides. So to really hold that soil in place for the streams. Here's another one for Hollywood Branch. You can see the before and after, and how much nicer it looks compared to what it had before and affecting the erosion. Here is one in Woodlawn. And I really love the next one where this shows kind of a complete, so it may not look exactly, perfect or beautiful in the beginning when we're when we completed a project, but then you have this one where you look at 6 months later and it's starting to fill in a little bit. We have some logs in there, all kinds of different techniques that we do. And then finally, here's the second year at the bottom picture where you can really see it kind of coming into its own and doing much better. So our Green Streets project, that's where we're going into neighborhoods. And we've done several of these. I think, I was actually at one earlier today. Glenmont Forest is the current one that we're working on. And we have about 400 or more, a little over 400 that we've put in the county so far. And that can consist of rain gardens, bioswales, tree boxes, and bioretentions, which are very similar to rain gardens, curb extensions, impervious sidewalks, and permeable pavements, where the water just absorbs right into your pavement. So how do we motivate other people about this? Here's one of the examples. We do our education. We have a pretty substantial education and outreach program. And this is one of our examples that was led by one of my coworkers, and it's just been great and kind of taken off. This is just storm drain paint, storm drain art. So we did a contest with local residents and had them submit some art and had folks decide, basically judge it. And we picked locations and picked the artists, and then they painted their art all over the place. So I don't recall the number. I think we have about 30 of them so far in different areas. The Wheaton area right around our headquarters and our building is the majority of where we have them now. But this is pretty much open to anybody. And I know Parks also is doing this type of project as well. So it's a really great one to work with volunteers and kind of get that community connection for folks. The next one is our grant program. So I work with nonprofits, whether it's a faith-based organization, people like Bethesda Green, which I know Kim will talk about a little bit later. these are projects, we've done 62 projects over the years. We started in 2014, 15, and we've given away about, or funded about $3 million worth to various nonprofit organizations, and anything from tree plantings to changing the parking lot from just regular asphalt to porous pavements. Let's see what else. Rain gardens, and just a ton of volunteers have helped with all of these projects. So it's really been a great project for us. And every year we try to get more and more money to fund and more projects in there. So it's just been, I think, really kind of one of the satisfying projects for me. And then again, our RainScapes program, you get rewards, rebates from the county if you do a rain garden on your property. There's several different practices like rain barrels, conservation landscaping, which is basically just planting with native plants and amending your soil a little bit, or getting rid of invasive plants. So doing a combination of these things, you can do several things on your own property to really prevent stormwater from just washing down and soaking into the ground. So for an individual property, you can get about $7,500 back, depending on the different type of projects that you select. And then we also have rebates for if you live in a homeowners association, and that can be spread out across the entire property, and they can get up to $20,000 back. And I think, you know, Kim might talk a little bit about that with Glenway Garden as well. And finally, I think this might be the last one, I'm not sure. Tree Montgomery. This is a great kind of a great program, which when I was speaking about the lots that were being enlarged with the larger homes, that effect, we were noticing how much of a reduction in the tree canopy was happening by that redevelopment, and you know, basically learned that, you know, that we needed to do something about that. So this is a program where developers either avoid the trees, don't take them down, or pay into a fund, the tree canopy law that was developed. And now through that fund, we are able to supply native plants, native trees, which are about probably 12 feet high. They're substantial trees, 2 to 3, 4-inch caliper trees. And they are planted by a contractor for us and maintained for 2 years. And it's just been an overwhelming success. We have lots of folks that are interested in this program and sign up. And this actually was started in the Bethesda area. So that's a focus area for us. And lastly, our education and community programs. These are all the ones I kind of spoke about earlier. But we have a lot of different programs that folks can participate in and volunteer for. So if you have any questions, I am certainly open to answer anything you have.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. All right. So I know that we had a few questions. Carrie, would you like to take yourself off mute and ask your question, the first one that you asked?
Yeah, I'm sure. Let's see if I get this question right. Essentially, I run a Facebook page on, you know, dealing with responsible growth in Montgomery County on Facebook. We're actually fighting Thrive Montgomery and the Attainable Housing Program right now. And I have had nothing but trouble with misinformation from Casey Anderson and even Hans Raymer. Hans at the last Fed committee meeting argued that compact growth, and he first argued that we don't have a stormwater problem in Montgomery County at the moment. And then his argument is that compact growth through like the attainable housing, duplexes, triplexes, quadruplexes, inner urban core, urban and suburban core, will have zero impact on stormwater. In fact, in the fiscal impact statement yesterday, he stated, he basically put $0 in the Thrive budget for stormwater mitigation, you know? And,
Okay.
and I want to hear your take on it. The public has to be educated because this is going to have a huge impact in the months and years ahead if Thrive is passed? I guess that's my question.
Okay. So I only have a certain area I cover, but this is an excellent question. So the difficulties with this is, we have the Stormwater Act 2007. Of course, when you're doing, no matter what kind of development is being done, you have to show that you're not going to be increasing the level of stormwater. So that's why a lot of these projects are doing stormwater mitigation right on the site. So that's really where we sit with where that's at. I don't know how to say that. So with DPS, they will go when someone puts in their plan for doing a development. It has to meet certain criteria, of course, and you're not supposed to be increasing the amount of runoff that would be happening on that property by the increase in development. So that has to meet all of those standards. And if they won't pass them if they don't. Now, the issues that end up happening, I think, is really come off the site. So you have to address all the stormwater that's going to be happening on that site, but it doesn't necessarily mean that when it flows off the property, is there an increase in the amount of stormwater that flows off property? It's it's a difficult question.
May I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah, sure.
As a result of all this, I spoke to the assistant director of stormwater management, and I was told, especially on small lots, right? Because we're talking in Thrive, we're talking about redevelopment of every single lot, house by house. I was told that essentially the only thing that is required is stormwater management for the 1-year storm, and that is for quality, not
That's
quantity.
Yep.
And that lot-to-lot flooding or nuisance flooding, first of all, you would have to prove that the developer somehow increased the water flowing, but as long as he abided by riparian rights, which didn't alter the natural flow of water,
Yep.
that he's off the hook. But what your PowerPoint demonstrated, that when you build a building, a house, right, to the maximum building restriction lines, and you try to provide at least one space per lot, okay, per unit, so a triplex, 3 spaces, to the rear of it and a driveway apron coming into it, you have very little. And in Montgomery County, they do allow waivers if it cannot be mitigated. You would just have to pay the maximum stormwater waiver. And I can see through Thrive and attainable housing, that's going to be the norm, not the exception. Tell me where I'm wrong.
I can't answer that aspect. I don't get into that political end of things. But as far as the stormwater on site, you're absolutely correct. I mean, they address water quality. So it's, that's where they put in the practices. So if you put in a dry well or, rain gardens, things like that, there's calculations associated with that on how much that will mitigate the stormwater. But again, it doesn't count for the volume end of things. It may slow some of it down, but we don't have the rules on that.
All right, thanks. Karen, you had your hand raised. Do you want to take yourself off mute and ask your question?
Sure, thank you. Actually, that's actually, I concur 100% with what Carrie just said. That's all the case. And Ryan, not to put this on your shoulders, I totally understand your position that you're in. It's tough, but it's true that there really is nothing the county can and will do when it comes to controlling runoff onto neighbors' properties. I mean, regularly, So Audubon did a survey, a study of the waivers recently for all this area that you've been describing,
Mhm.
and 88% of the waivers have been in this area. And basically, what happens? They don't put in the dry wells, they don't put in the rain gardens, and it's common practice to just aim their gutters off those huge houses at their neighbors, and as long as they comply with the permit, they got the waiver, so they're complying. There's nothing the county can or will do about it, and it's up to the impacted homeowner, and then up to programs like the wonderful rain garden program, etc., to try to deal with the fallout. So it's right, not DEP's fault. It's our county ordinance that is setting up this craziness. Earlier, someone had asked the question about what is the maximum lot coverage allowed, and someone put a link in that said 35%. Clearly, I live in the very neighborhood that you had all those pictures
Okay.
about. I used to live on Maple Avenue. I know those houses, or what used to be there.
Yeah.
Clearly, that's way more than 35%. Can you explain that? I mean, our whole street is redeveloping into these ginormous houses that are at least 80% impervious covered. So can you explain that to us? Why the ordinance says 35%, but these huge houses are covering the vast majority of the lot?
I would love to. I don't work for a Department of Permitting Services, but yeah, that's pretty much the extent of what I can say. I'm glad you were able to say what you said. I can't say some of these things, but so I can't. I'm not
Well,
sure
Ryan, why
how
don't we
that
do
process
this?
works, but
So
yeah.
one of the other questions was, how does DEP and DPS work together? So maybe you could speak a
Sure,
little
thank you.
bit to that.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
So we do have, let's see, how do we work together? So when all this was kind of being recognized, I guess you'd say, the tree canopy was being lost, and some of these other factors were happening. So we spent a lot of time working on ways to prevent that from happening. And it's not going to satisfy everyone. We are able to put the tree canopy law in place. It was an uphill battle. It took several years, and we do now have areas where we can add trees, which is great. But that may not satisfy some folks' thoughts on well, don't take them out in the first place, which is certainly an option. Now, where we work with DPS, we're constantly looking at our rules of what is approved, what is not, as far as stormwater practices. So we have regular meetings. I'm not part of them, but I know that we did have regular meetings with DPS when it came to our green streets and the practice of knowing what can be permitted, what cannot, and it's difficult to. There's so many different kind of agendas. I mean, like, so you're talking traffic and trying to think of some of the other ones, all kinds of different areas where people are interested in things, your safety, all that kind of stuff. So like, we have to kind of give a little and take a little in some of these instances. So if we want to put in a rain garden in a certain area there, and it's not going to fit with the safety regulations or traffic flow or things like even just this morning, we were planting a tree in an area that was deemed, it was too close to a stop there, line of sight. So, that was part of a bioretention that was going in there, and that was going to prevent stormwater. But we ended up having to modify that because of the safety concerns. So it's a difficult thing to work on, and every agency or every department has its own focus. So it is difficult to kind of work together on some of that and come to a common ground.
Great. Yeah. So I guess following up on that real quick, and then we are going to move on. We're going to talk about a Bethesda Green project. So does DPS and DEP do independent evaluations of proposed projects? And do they have staff and resources to complete the independent evaluations? I think that was, you were getting to that a little bit.
Yeah. So so for projects that we're proposing, we work with our contractors and make sure that they're in good shape for what we want to accomplish, and then we send them to DPS. DPS does their evaluation, and then it gets sent down to us not for approval, but just to count into our system. Now, if it's for plan development elsewhere, we really don't have any involvement in that. And that's the private developers, and they go through DPS. They have their list. They go from the state of what's approved and what they can install, but that's strictly independent through Department of Permitting Services, and they have their list from the state of what they can approve, and the developer just has to meet those. So it's really that's a political, I guess, advocacy area.
Maybe another sustainability series in the future that we'll host.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'd like to thank Ryan for his time, and I would like to share my screen, and I'm going to talk about a project that we are actually doing at Bethesda Green to address some of the stormwater. So Bethesda Green, we are working with the Bethesda Urban Partnership, our downtown Bethesda group, to install a series of rain gardens or conservation landscapes in some tree panels on Woodmont Avenue. We do have a subcontractor selected for the conceptual designs, and we're looking at a possible installation date of spring 2022. So more on this project to come in the future. And this is just what the tree panels look like. And then also in the past, Bethesda Green, I don't unfortunately have time to show it, but Bethesda Green in the past has worked with Glenway Gardens Condominium on installing a series of cisterns, and then also installing 2 conservation landscapes on the site to address some stormwater flow. Glenway Gardens is located in Silver Spring, Maryland. And I can send out a link to, we have a longer video that folks can look at their leisure on our website. So any questions? I didn't notice that we have our subcontractor on, if Leslie would like to say hi in the chat, and I can connect folks if folks have any questions about our landscape architect that we selected. But we're really excited about this project. The Bethesda Urban Partnership thought that this site would be great because it's highly visible. So we're going to be doing a series of educational components at the site, including educational signs, and then looking at the site. Unfortunately, the trees on the site right now are sinking a little bit because there's some stormwater. So we're going to be looking at addressing some of those issues into the future. So we're excited about this project coming up, and hopefully hear more from Bethesda Green on this project in the future. And I wanted to see if there were any questions on Bethesda Green, or if there were any more questions for Ryan. I know some of my environmental leader high school interns are on, and I'd like to give them a chance to ask some questions if they had any questions. And I think that was it. Were there any questions in the chat? Well, Ryan, looks like we got some shout outs that your presentation was very informative. Which is
sorry,
great.
I couldn't see anybody.
Andrew, that's okay. Andrew, do you want to, you raised your hand. Would you like to take yourself off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So Ryan, you mentioned that to mitigate stormwater, the whole stormwater issue, there were pervious pavement surfaces that we could use. What type of surfaces would that be?
So depending on what you want to do, really what we look at is kind of the retrofit. So if you have an existing driveway, let's say, whether it's asphalt, concrete, what have you, you can replace that with it's called a permeable paver or pavement system. So it's pavement bricks, almost like you would have a regular patio, but they have a kind of notches at certain areas, and it allows to have a gap where you can put this small screening stone, not screening stones, but smaller stones in between. And then when it rains, it flows in between there. Now there's also a capacity area underneath that. So it's there's specifications for it, but typically you would have like a 12 inches to 18 inches of like a 2B stone, which is like a 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches, I think. Don't quote me, but you know, just your regular fill stone, and that goes underneath, and that's kind of where the capacity is. So what happens there? It's there's a 40% void space. That is the specification for that. So that's where the water, you know, gets to absorb in that area, and it's kind of like almost acts as a storage. And we've seen so many of them. We've done different tours, and you just, you know, you can pour water right on the pavers, and it goes right into the ground, and it's great. It's a little on, I don't want to say on the pricier end, but there's different reasons for it. But we've funded grants for those types of practices, and we also fund them through our RainScapes program as well.
All right, fantastic, thanks. And just to follow up on the pavers, oh, and just to let folks know, I put the link to the Glenway Garden video from our Bethesda Green website in the chat, so folks can go ahead and watch the video at their leisure. Follow-up question for you, Ryan. Does the county have a cost offset program for the pervious pavers?
Cost offset. So no. We have,
but maybe it's a great idea.
So I'm like, well, so we have like our RainScape. So with the way our RainScapes program works, it's the fund is out there first. You have to pay first, and then you get the rebate back. So there's no cost share in that sense. It's not that it hasn't been something that's talked about. It does sound like a very good idea. I think also like what we do with our Green Streets program. You know, this is my personal opinion, not speaking for what my company does here, but or the government works. But I think that that might be something that could be done in the future.
Fantastic. And does that include driveway pavers?
Driveway pavers, if they're pervious. So like if you're replacing your driveway with just straight pavers, we don't fund that.
Okay.
Yeah, it has to have that kind of like that gap that's in between there. Yeah.
Okay. Philip, you had a question.
Yes. Hi, Brian. Thanks for excellent presentation. I just wanted to let you know, in case you didn't already, there are a number of us on this call that have been working intensively with Hucker's office to establish the priorities for the coming legislative session around the climate action plan, in particular paying attention to adaptation, sequestration, and stormwater as it intersects with those. So it's me, Nancy Wilkinson, Karen Metches, Sylvia Tugnetti. So that's why we're interested in this particular presentation. My specific question is that there's growing sentiment that the stream restorations aren't, that they're largely, you know, big equipment, moving heavy rocks. Clearly the photos you've chosen are addressing some serious erosion issues, but the damage done in the interim to native habitat and the natural flow, even though you've got a nice pretty picture 2 years later, you're still basically haven't addressed the upstream source of the increased flow during the stormwater events, I think in large part. I know you're working on many other sort of things to address that, but it seems like significant amounts of the budget are being spent on these restoration projects when the MS4, you know, list of qualified things that can be done is much more than that. So there's a suggestion there should be a moratorium on stream restorations until an evaluation can be done of their effectiveness, particularly the dollar cost, you know, expenditures, and whether those dollars could be better spent, you know, upstream to kind of control the problem before it becomes a serious erosion problem. Any comments?
that was a very good explanation there. Sure. So I handle the outreach end of things, but I'm very familiar with this. So I guess I would say I appreciate everyone's interest in this topic. And there's many factors that go into all of this, of course, with budget and things like that, and trying to decide what we can do, where we can do it. And we really, I think, over time, we've certainly made some improvements, and we definitely like to listen to our residents, and we want to make that a important aspect in how we do our work. So I know there's something we're working on a stream restoration webinar series right now, where we're going to be setting up some listening sessions or a listening session, and do some presentations about what we do and what other practitioners do and what the value of it is, things like that. So there's a lot of factors that go into, not all, I can't really explain all of them today, but I guess.
Ryan, would it help if maybe you had some time to answer this question, and we could provide some additional information either from your department, and we could include that in our follow-up email? That might be helpful for folks. Yeah, and maybe answer some questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Phil.
Yeah, and we will, whenever you have the stormwater or the stream health series ready, we'd be happy to advertise that for you, because I'm sure this group would be interested. So yeah, that'd be great.
Definitely.
Alicia, you had a question, so I'll let you. Do you want to take yourself off mute and ask your question, Alicia?
Yeah, sure. So I thought that the green streets were very interesting, and I was wondering like where they've been installed in the area and like what the costs were for different types.
So I don't have the costs in front of me right now, but that would be for our construction folks. But we've done several mostly in the down county areas. Sligo Creek has been a large area that we've worked on. The one we're doing right now is Glenmont Forest and Wheaton Hills. What other ones? Franklin Knolls, Forest Estates have been some of the ones. I can't think of all the ones that we've done, but I think it's somewhere around 8 or 10 areas that we've done in the county so far. And as far as cost, I don't have that number. I know I've heard that before, but it's not my forte area. But
just out of curiosity, Ryan, is there an average size of the project, or a limit, like a maximum or a minimum of the project for the green street?
So I don't know about minimum, like for like an individual BMP. Not really. I mean, we have an average size, but really it's the utility, the constraints of the site. So most of them, if memory serves, they're anywhere from like 10 to 20 feet long, and then the width of the green panel. So, that's probably one of the longer or larger ones, but on average, I would say, that's the width of the green panel, and then about 10 foot. We've had much smaller ones though.
Yeah. And Adam, you had a question, so I'll have you take yourself off mute. Adam Roberts.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Thanks, Ryan. That was great. I actually had just put my question in the chat right before Phil asked his. I was just so piggybacking on what he was saying.
Mm-hmm. Oh. I think
that's looking at climate action priorities to recommend to the council. I was just wondering if.
Yep, you're cutting in and out. So what I'll do, Adam,
Yep.
is I'll read your question from the chat.
So
thanks, the question
Kim.
was, is there anything concerned citizens can request the county council to do in this fall's session to facilitate or expand stormwater mitigation work?
In other words, do you need some new legislative authority to expand this work, or do you have it?
I don't know that that's something I can I can say. If nonprofits and citizens are interested in advocating for these things, then that's certainly something you can do.
I think we'd love to support your work, Ryan.
And I appreciate that. Yeah.
So another question, is there a map of all the stream restoration projects like on the website so that folks can take a self-guided tour?
Yes. So we have, let's see, the best one, I would say, so we just started our equity map. And that was last, let's see, God, it's hard to even remember the months and years now, but I think it was last August where we launched that. And it was basically taking a look at stormwater suitability and comparing that to equity issues. And we have a map on our website now. It's basically, I think you had listed it on here, but instead of the backslash streams, it's backslash equity. And you can look at our stormwater maps and our equity maps, and you'll see some of the projects that we have on there.
All right, fantastic. We have about a minute left. Does anybody have any questions about Bethesda Green and our stormwater work, or any final questions for Ryan? I think we have some really amazing ideas for some sustainability series in the future. So
Oh,
been a
I
really
have
great
one other
discussion. Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
one other point I was just going to say. So our grant program is open right now for applications. So if there's anyone who is involved with a nonprofit or knows of a property that would be beneficial to having some of these practices put in, feel free to check out the RFP. I can put the link in the chat, and it's open right now, and it closes December 2nd.
Right,
Quick
fantastic.
question. 3 jurisdictions are excluded from the rain gardens program. Does that apply here as well, or is it?
Correct. Yes, same.
So if
same
I'm in Tacoma
situation.
Park, I'm not eligible for this grant program?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. And to answer your question, Nancy, Bethesda Green does work with Stormwater Partners. I don't know if you're asking about Bethesda Green or if you're asking about or the county, but yes, we do work with Stormwater Partners. We worked with several HOAs in the past for stormwater restoration work, which is why I mentioned Glenway Gardens. And I can put the link to the video again so you can see what we did on their property. Ryan, could you give an overview again of where you work and your title?
Oh, sure. So it's Ryan Zerbe. I'm the Watershed Outreach Planner for the Department of Environmental Protection, and handle all kinds of outreach aspects related to stormwater and our grant program for nonprofits.
Fantastic. I'd like to thank everybody for attending tonight. I'd like to thank Ryan for his time and for all the folks with really thoughtful questions and really wonderful suggestions. It sounds like we have some great educational opportunities in the future. So thank you again, Ryan. And we'll be sending out a recording of this presentation so that folks can watch it again. And then we'll also send out Ryan's contact information, and hopefully he'll have some other stormwater information for us in the future. And I hope to see everybody again on the next webinar. So thank you, Ryan, and thank you everybody else, and have a wonderful evening.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.